Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the workshop on model-based control of soft robots, which is part from the European Control Conference of this year. My name is Caasenbrood. I'm a PhD student at the Eindhoven University of Technology. We organized this workshop together with Cosimo della Santina from Delft University, and who's also part from the German Aerospace Center, DLR. And we also organized this with Alexander Prokomsky, which is also part from Eindhoven University of Technology. Before I want to start, I want to give a very quick introduction into soft robotics for the attendees that are not familiar with soft robots. So soft robotics is essentially a new field of robotics where instead of using the classic materials that we're used to in rigid robotics, like aluminium or harder epoxies, and we're using softer materials. And what these softer materials essentially allow us to do are a wider range of continuum bodied motion. Also, they are very robust towards unknown environments, and they also have the beneficial property that they're intrinsically safe. So the field of soft robotics is not new. It started in the 1980s, but it's recently getting a lot of attention in the scientific community. So there's a couple of challenges with soft robotics, in particular for modeling and control. And one of the key challenges is that it's quite difficult to describe the degrees of freedom that you have in your system. So you can imagine for a rigid robot, every joint represents a degree of freedom for your system. But for a soft robot, since you essentially have continuum bodied motion, it becomes a bit more tricky to describe the states in your system. There's also a large emphasis on the mechanical nature of these soft materials. And since modeling is so challenging, it's quite tricky to essentially transfer the classic control theories that we know from rigid robotics to this newer field of soft robotics. So the workshop is divided into two parts. So the first part will be hosted by me, and it is about modeling of soft robots. And the second part will be hosted by Cosimo della Santina, and it's about control applications for soft robots. In total, we have 5 speakers. So it's 4 keynotes of 45 minutes long and 5 invited talks of 30 minutes long. The keynotes include a 10-minute Q&A, and the invited talks include a 5-minute Q&A. So this workshop will be recorded and released publicly. And if you wish to be removed from the recording, then please let us know either in the chat or contact me afterwards. So we start with session 1, which is about modeling of soft robots. And we start this morning with 2 talks. So the first talk is from Professor Stefano Stramigioli from Twente University. And then after Stefano, there's a talk from Federico Renda from Khalifa University. After these 2 talks, we have a short coffee break of 15 minutes. And then we follow up with our next speakers. So the second keynote from the first session is by Christian Dures from INRIA Lille. Then we follow up with a presentation from Stanislao Grazioso from University of Naples. And lastly, for session 1, we have a talk from Moritz Becher from Disney Research Zurich. After session 1, we have a lunch break of 1 hour. Well, then we follow up with a session 2, which is about control applications for soft robots, and Cosimo della Santina will host this part of the workshop. So we start with a keynote from Alessandro De Luca from University of Rome. And then after Alessandro, there's a talk from Enrico Franco from Imperial College London. After these 2 talks, we have a very short coffee break of 15 minutes. And then lastly, we have our 2 speakers, which is first a keynote from Concepcion Alicia Monche from University of Madrid. And then lastly, we have a talk from Franco Angelini from the University of Pisa. And then we'll end our workshop, and we'll just keep our workshop open for a bit longer to allow for discussion between the speakers and also the attendees. So for the attendees, there's a couple of ways that you can ask questions. So the first one is that you just raise your hand, and then I'll give me a sign that I'll just make you a panelist, and then you can unmute yourself and you can ask your questions directly to the speaker. The second option is that you can do it via chat. And this gives the indication that you don't want to use audio or video. The host will just read out your question and then read your question to the speaker. And lastly, if the talk already ended and also the Q&A session, what you can do is that you can use the Q&A chat that is embedded in Zoom to just ask your question directly to the speaker. The host will keep a track on upcoming Q&A chats and also inform the speakers that they have to answer these Q&A chats. If you're using either the chats or the Q&A chats, please address your question to a specific speaker. And you can do this just by using @ and then the name of the speaker and then just the question that you have. So without further ado, I think we can start our workshop. So we start with a keynote from Stefano Stramigioli, and the title of his talk is How to Tackle Multi-Physical Systems. So Stefano, the floor is yours. If you can share your screen, that would be great.